Everyone. Thank you for the invitation to launch the Learn Well, Live Well report. It's a pleasure to be with you, albeit virtually, but if COVID has taught us one thing, it is how we can be creative in our communications. The impact of learning on health and well-being cannot be underestimated. For people to lead healthy and productive lives, they need knowledge to develop well-being and mindfulness, maintain healthy lifestyles, and to help keep sickness and disease at bay. Learning helps to promote positive choices. It supports and nurtures our development, our relationships, as well as personal, family, and community well-being. It makes us mentally stronger and equips us to deal with the wide-ranging challenges that we face as a society. These important points are highlighted in the Learn Well, Live Well report. The report also lays down a challenge for government. It calls on us to develop cross-cutting objectives and develop operational structures and funding that are based on collaborative working. The Northern Ireland Executive is currently undertaking the development of its new strategic outcomes-based programme for government. It aims to improve the quality of people's lives. The outcomes approach starts with the end vision. The focus is on results rather than just delivery. Our goal is to build an inclusive society in which all people of all ages and backgrounds can enjoy long, healthy, active lives. Government cannot do this alone, and so we would very much welcome the commitment shown in this report toward collaboration and partnership working. As you rightly say, the changes required to develop the learning and health provision for communities necessitate collaborative efforts from policymakers and indeed practitioners as well. That is both an aspiration and indeed a challenge. So today's report clearly demonstrates the excellent and far-reaching work already going on across the sectors here, but recognises that more needs to be done to keep making positive differences to people's lives. To that end, I look forward to hearing and seeing the results of your endeavours as we strive to deliver better outcomes for all of our citizens. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for inviting me to be part of the virtual launch of the Learn Well, Live Well report. I'd like to congratulate Belfast Learning City and the NI Impact Forum on Adult Learning on producing this insightful report, which clearly shows the benefits of adult learning on health and well-being. Education is very much a catalyst for personal development and a healthy approach to life. It develops the skills, values and the attitudes that enable us all to lead healthy, fulfilled lives and to make informed decisions. A culture of lifelong learning will help to drive down inequalities across our society and improve the circumstances of the most disadvantaged in our community. The essence of the Learn Well, Live Well report echoes the sentiment of the Executive's outcomes-based programme for government. That is, to improve societal well-being for all. Improving the mental health and well-being of our society is something that we as a five-party power-sharing executive are absolutely committed to. And this report clearly shows the important link between education and mental and physical health and well-being. We want the new programme for government to be one which proactively responds to such relationships and brings together the different strands of public policy to make lives better for all of our people. Partnership working and co-design will be crucial in delivering that. And your report highlights the need to get involved in government consultations. So I'd encourage you all to contribute to the ongoing draft Programme for Government Framework consultation. I wish you all well with the outworkings of your report, and by working together, let's move forward in our journey to improve overall well-being in society. Thank you all very much indeed. Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you to the two junior ministers for recording their messages. Could I just make it clear that there is absolutely no political significance in the fact that we muted the DUP? I apologise sincerely for that, and I hope you were able to get the full gist of what both ministers had to say. They made some very important points about the importance and the role of adult learning. And also they touched on the question of the programme for government and the consultation on that programme, and I'll come back to that at the end of the event this afternoon. We now have a message, an international message. We were very pleased that Raul Valdez Cotera agreed to write the introduction to the Learn Well, Live Well report. And Raul has very kindly joined us this afternoon to deliver a message of support. He's here live with us, so I trust there will be no repeat of any video problems. So Raul, we're delighted that you were able to join us. Thank you for writing the introduction to the report, and we look forward to what you have to say to us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I would like to give a welcome to the messages of the Honorable Junior Ministers, Mr. Declan Kearney and Mr. Gary Middleton, and appreciate the participation of all people to share their ideas and learn a little bit of this marvelous report. I think that the launch of the report today with the title Learn Well, Live Well, Adult Learning and Health and Well-Being is a cause for celebration. And this has been a collective effort of so many contributors, key actors, organizations. And on behalf of the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning based in Hamburg, Germany, I feel very honored to be given this opportunity to contribute with the introductory text of the report and help identifying more links between health, adult education, lifelong learning. In almost all countries affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, cities are the epicenters of infection and the front lines for dealing with the vast implication of the public health emergency. In pursuit of effective education responses, many cities have mobilized cross-sectoral resources and are promoting, supporting, and developing a variety of non-formal and informal learning initiatives to ensure continuity of education and to equip and empower citizens with multifaceted tools to face the crisis. Education is a catalyst for development and a health intervention on its own right. The 2019 Incheon Declarations confirms that education develops the skills, the values and the attitudes that enable citizens to lead healthy and fulfilled lives, make informed decisions, and respond to local and global challenges. On this basis, we can witness how COVID-19 is creating unprecedented challenges for our health, our economy, our social well-being, and highlights the importance of addressing challenges in the field of lifelong learning and education. It is envisaged that the work of the cities and communities will contribute to the development of further improving relevant to lifelong learning policies and strategies in connection with the topic of learning for health and well-being, but also designing and reinforcing initiatives for implementing policies and strategies related to other topic areas: education for sustainable development, global citizenship education, literacy and basic skills, etc., all of them related. To achieve these goals, new research strategies are needed, focused on program content and on the implementation process across multi-sectoral contexts. This is critical for cities and countries where the research potential is still in the early stages of development. The case studies presented in this report show that many cities, communities, follow a lifelong learning approach with the objective of increasing and expanding participation in education among all groups of society. Adult learning for health and well-being is regarded a valuable and powerful tool to tackle social exclusion, as well as to strengthen civil society and enhance participation in public decision-making. We're also able to notice that increasing number of cities engage local communities and organize events to spread a culture of learning and to address social, environmental, and health issues. The cases also show that cities increasingly integrate lifelong learning into their development plans, enabling a more strategic approach to sector-wide sustainable development. The COVID-19 pandemic has once again underlined the importance of lifelong learning in facing global challenges. The complexity of the challenges will continue to increase, and lifelong learning can help citizens around the world to understand them and take appropriate action. Undoubtedly, cities will play a key role therein. The UNESCO Learning Cities provide excellent examples of how to make it happen, driving changes towards sustainable development, and the implementation of the 2030 agenda can be found in different cities all over the world. Finally, I just would like to take this opportunity to inform you that the 5th International Conference on Learning Cities is due to take place in autumn 2021 under the working title of Global Health Education and Emergency Responses. And just to let you know that this concerns the entire world. The topic is reflected in different cities all over the world. I am therefore pleased to see that this important topic being increasing, taking up at local level and national levels. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Raul, for what you had to say there. I think it's always great to be reminded and useful to be reminded that the issues which you're grappling with in this relatively small part of the world are the issues that colleagues, as you quite rightly say, across many countries and continents are actually trying to find answers to as well. So hopefully our modest contribution in the production of this report will be of interest, not just in Northern Ireland, but perhaps beyond our shores as well. Thank you, Raul, for what you had to say to us. And again, thank you for your endorsement of the Thank you very much, Raul. Sorry for the slight delay. I think it's always great to be reminded there's an international perspective to what we're working on in what seems like a small part of the world in Northern Ireland. So thank you for what you had to say, and thanks again for the endorsement which UNESCO have given through you to our work here and your contribution in terms of writing the introduction to the report. So thank you very much, Raul. It's now time to learn a bit more about the report itself. And to do that, we're going to have a presentation led by two of the people who were involved in the editorial team which put the report together. That's Dolores Atkinson from Belfast Learning City and Colin Nealons from the Northern Ireland Impact Forum. And if I could just remind participants again, we welcome all comments which you may wish to make through the chat room. And again, if you'd like to flag up any questions which could be put to the panel in the later discussion, that would also be very welcome. So now it's the report, Learn Well, Live Well, and over to Dolores and Colin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and apologies for occasional hiccups. Usually I have someone else managing all the tech side for me, and I'm doing it on my own today. So there's been one or two little hiccups. Hopefully there won't be any more. So good afternoon, everybody. And over the next 10 minutes or so, Dolores and I hope to give you a taster of what you will find in the report. Some of you will know the background, but for those of you who don't, this report has come out of the 2020 UK EAL programme, which is managed by the Learning and Work Institute. The Learning and Work Institute set up 4 impact forums around the UK back in 2014 to engage local stakeholders and to share experiences and resources across the different nations. In 2017, all 4 impact forums collaborated on the Healthy, Wealthy and Wise report, which looked at the impact of adult learning on health, the economy and communities. This present report builds on Healthy, Wealthy and Wise And this time around, the forum was delighted to be able to partner with Belfast Learning City. Dolores?
Hey, yep, thank you. Hi, everyone. So here you see on the screen the list of the chapters and the authors for the report. I'd like to start by saying a huge thank you to all the authors. We were absolutely delighted with the quality and range of people who responded to our call for submissions for the chapters. We're so appreciative to you all for sharing so generously on your area of expertise. As you can see from the list, it really is a great mix across the spectrum of learning. All the authors highlight how the broad range of learning, both directly and indirectly, can improve the health and well-being of individuals, of families, communities and cities, including building the resilience needed to cope in times of crisis and the current pandemic in particular. So to give a flavour, we see, for example, the importance of health literacy, which is having the understanding and the confidence needed to advocate for your own health needs and to navigate healthcare systems to do so. And COVID in particular has highlighted how a lack of information, poor understanding, and receiving mixed or confused messages can impact negatively upon managing your own health and the health of others. Authors share their wealth of experience and research in the field of learning in older people, the role of learning in improving physical and mental health. And you'll see in the chapter on work well-being and workplace learning in a time of global pandemic, that learning in the workplace is actually really key to helping make work and access to work a positive and life-changing environment for everyone. But also, the author explores the role it plays in building social justice and creating a fair society and tackling inequalities in society. This runs throughout the report. UNESCO in the introduction and Cork in the Learning City perspective offer key insights, as Raoul has explained, into how learning can achieve positive outcomes across a range of issues such as health, social inclusion, employability, education, planet, and building resilience through collaboration across sectors and government directives. In the conclusions, we've tried to group together the main themes and recommendations of our authors, such as value in learning throughout and across the lifespan, the need to create a lifelong learning culture, and crucially, the need to plan and work in collaboration. Colin.
We'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who submitted case studies for consideration or inclusion in this report. You made our job as editors really, really difficult, but we came down to these 16 in the end, 2 per chapter, which show a range of work across sectors and across Northern Ireland, and which best illustrate the contents of the report. These case studies serve to ground the report in the excellent practice that we all know abounds in Northern Ireland. Dolores.
This powerful statement that you see on the screen is at the heart of our report, and it comes from the chapter on learning and mental health and well-being written by Dr. Tony Cassidy. Behind this statement is the fundamental belief that learning has the potential to transform lives in many ways, and that, as the quote says, is learning from whatever source, whether you're learning for your work, whether you're learning for your health, understanding other cultures and communities, relationships, the world around us. Learning can transform lives for the better. And it benefits not just individuals, but also families and communities. It offers opportunities to connect people, to build networks, to build resilience. And through empowerment of people and building more capacity in communities, learning creates a healthier, stronger society where everyone can thrive and flourish in life. And these key themes of empowerment, building resilience, building community capacity run throughout the chapters. Colin.
So in the next few slides, we have some quotations from the report, little nuggets that we're using to illustrate core themes, which are then expounded upon in more detail in the report's conclusion. So empowerment is the first here, and empowerment may not be a term which has always been in fashion. I've always liked it, but it is key to effective interventions in both adult learning and health and well-being. We need to put people at the core of the development and delivery of both policy and practice, particularly those who are the most disadvantaged. Instead of doing things to people, we need to do things with people. Dolores.
Okay. Colin said the theme of tackling inequalities is at the core of this report. How learning can be used to improve the lives of the most disadvantaged people and communities. And throughout the report, the chapters and the case studies all highlight the need and showcase best practice in reaching out to those most in need, those groups often left behind. Authors demonstrate, and the case studies in particular, by shining an example, the outcomes of their work. The report, as you'll see, has lots of very positive photographs and images of people who have benefited so much from support at the right time in their lives and at times of great stress and often great need. For example, those caring for others, those recovering from an illness, those feeling marginalised in society. What runs through this report is that groups already disadvantaged are most at risk of being further marginalised in the pandemic. So the report highlights the need for continued investment and a continued focus on these groups. As the quote on the screen says, a lack of investment in community learning actually equates to a lack of investment in health and well-being. Colin.
So 3 themes to cover in this one slide here. We're saying that more data needs to be gathered on the impact of adult learning on health and well-being. If presently funders and government are not asking for this, it doesn't stop providers from collecting this data and then presenting it to them as something valuable, which they should now be integrating into all learning evaluation. We can only make progress through collaboration, whether in creating policy or in delivering practice. And obviously, this must link back to what was said about empowerment also. We must acknowledge our own silos and not just point the finger at others. And we need appropriate, effective policies, as they will be the key drivers to ensure that good intentions and good talk becomes a reality in terms of delivery. Dolores.
Final slide for me. We could not do a report about learning in 2020 without looking at the impact of COVID-19 and its repercussions on people and services. These quotes highlight the vital role community centres, libraries, museums, women's centres and so on have played in meeting the diverse needs of all citizens. Every place can be a place of learning. For those who could not access local resources and for those limited to their home, we see the pressures in the report that this has created and a deepening of the digital divide, as mentioned in particular in the chapter on older people and the chapter on physical activity, specifically looking at the impact on minority ethnic communities. We have a lot to learn now from the organisations and the communities in the cities who have begun to address this divide to avoid further isolation and disadvantage. Contributors to the report highlighted how COVID amplified existing inequalities, but also crucially highlighted the opportunities and the benefits that have presented themselves over the past year, for example, in the workplace. Our question now is, can we hold on to these lessons and not just return to the status quo that we had before COVID? Can the same spirit of must do and can do survive in terms of collaboration and cooperation, quick responses to urgent needs, and putting the most vulnerable in society at the heart of planning and agendas? Colin.
And just to finish off, a succinct slide. The conclusion, which is there in the introduction and in the acknowledgements, etc., of the report, is that a healthy society will learn well, and a learning society will live well. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy reading the report.
Thank you. Thank you to Colin and Dolores for the presentation. That's given you a flavour of the report, and Colin has encouraged us to read the report, which is available to be downloaded from our website, and we'll be giving you details in relation to that before we finish this afternoon. But we would like to have a little bit of initial discussion in terms of the content of the report. And to that end, we have a panel this afternoon. I'll just briefly introduce them. Colin explained that the Impact Forum works under the umbrella of the Learning and Work Institute. We're pleased to have Stephen Evans, who's the Chief Executive of LWI, with us this afternoon. We also have Brian Nelson. Brian is Co-Director of Public Health at the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust. We have Kelly Gilliland, who's the Neighbourhood Services Manager in the north of the city for Belfast City Council. And we also have Danny Power, who is the Chair of Belfast Learning City. And Danny was also part of the editorial team for the report itself. So I would encourage anyone who has a question to flag it up, please, through the chat room. But I'm going to start by asking the members of the panel just to give their initial report, initial response as to the importance of the report and what they're drawing from it. And Stephen, I'll perhaps start with you, because this is officially a Learning and Work Institute report. LWI publishes many different reports. So how would you sum up very briefly the significance of the Learn Well, Live Well report?
Yeah, thanks, Trevor, and afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many people here to talk about the role of lifelong learning and adult education. And I think the report really covers a very important topic, and it's a great read. So I encourage everyone to read it as we get the link out. I think there's probably a couple of key things that really stood out for me, both reading the report and also the earlier part of the discussion today. So the first is quite how many interactions there are between lifelong learning and adult education and health and well-being. So it's not a kind of very simple relationship. There's all these different interactions, all these, and I think some of the chapters highlight some of that. So there's lots of links going on there. And then the second thing is quite how many brilliant examples there actually are. So, I mean, the case studies that have been highlighted are really fantastic examples of, getting on with it and showing the difference we can make. And the fact that you had such a tough job narrowing it down is a good sign, because it shows that there's so many good things going on. I guess then perhaps just a couple of quick further reflections off the back of that. So the first is, it's great that we heard from Raoul earlier, and I think you were saying that it's really important that we share some of these lessons across different countries, and I think that's very true. I'm always struck when I speak with people from different countries about adult learning in general, quite how obviously different countries are different, but actually how common some of the contexts are. And actually there's so much that we can learn from each other, and so many great examples going on in different countries. So it'd be great to showcase some of these examples elsewhere and to see what Northern Ireland can learn from things that are going on elsewhere too. But the second thing is the pandemic has brought this into really stark relief, and we're all kind of zooming away here, aren't we? All a bit zoomed out. So we're a year on, I still haven't remembered when to mute and unmute, and I think we're all in the same boat on that front. But in Northern Ireland, for example, the number of people claiming unemployment-related benefits has doubled since March 2020. So Northern Ireland had a lower employment rate than the UK as a whole to start with, and has now got that sharp rise since last spring. So actually the links between learning and health and well-being and employment, bringing all those things together feels like really important as we look to recover from the pandemic, as the vaccine programme rolls out so successfully. Same time, we need to think not just about recovery from the pandemic, but renewal as well. I think the 2020s need to be a decade of recovery and renewal. So this is not just about trying to get back to where we were, it's about how we get to a better place. So how do we build communities? How do we help engage people? How do we think about improving health and well-being? How do we think about an aging population and more people living with long-term health conditions, and how adult learning links onto that? And then again, perhaps the last point before I stop is about the sort of a bit more about how that pandemic has really sharpened some of these things. So I think we were talking earlier about people being stuck inside. You know, I can't believe that there were various points. If you told 2019 me that there would be various points in the next year where it would be illegal for me to sit on a bench, I'd have asked for whatever you were on, to be honest. And yet here we are, and I'm delighted when the health minister says that children can have play days, for example. You know, what a weird world we're in. But that kind of health and well-being, that exercise, that aging population, I know that's come through on the chat as well, and how we all get a bit zoomed out if we're working from home, or actually lots of people have still been working from the office. For me, that really strengthens the importance of the links between adult learning and health and well-being. And so it makes this report even more important than if it had been published a year ago. And I think we need to collectively make the case for why this matters and show the examples that are making a difference, and really make this part of our recovery from the pandemic. So I'm keen to listen to others and to think about how we can all work together to make that happen. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. We'll be back to you later. Brian, would you like to make just an initial comment? Obviously, you're coming very much from a public health point of view. So any initial comments on the significance of the report?
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Trevor, and everybody. Yeah, look, I mean, I suppose, first of all, I just want to pay a wee bit of respect to our worker, Dolores, who's been working on this tirelessly over the last number of years. I'm sure loads of people would agree. It hasn't been an easy journey, but Dolores has been really fully committed to this piece of work. And I suppose for her and all the people on the working group, I suppose, congratulations on developing this report. I think it is really, really important. I mean, there's a lot of talk around reducing inequalities and how we reduce inequalities across the city of Belfast. And I think we are very much aware that lifelong learning and the Learning City approach that's been adopted across Belfast is definitely a significant contributor and factor to that. I think what I liked about the report, Dolores quoted it, I think, just in a bit she was saying, is about learning is the foundation for health and well-being, and I think that's really, really essential as a building block to do it. I think it's something that we always haven't necessarily thought of, but I think it is just very, very important. I think that also, I suppose, links across to individuals and communities, and I think, you know, it's at a range of levels that we need to actually work on. And I think the whole thing around that is the whole thing around then creating resilience. And I think, as Stephen said, I suppose earlier, we need some resilience, we need some bounce back after COVID to move forward. I suppose just from a Belfast perspective, I think people will be aware that we've got a community planning infrastructure across the city. But one of the approaches that we're currently looking at is the whole thing around population health. And I think that's around promoting well-being and preventing ill health across the whole population. And I suppose just one of the factors in population health is looking at the wider determinants, and that talks about health, housing and education. And I think this report and all the work around lifelong learning certainly fits in within that. The other point that I think is really important is I think it was maybe Colin mentioned about empowerment. Empowerment in public health and my world has been around for a long time, but I think it is really, really important. And I think that the whole thing about placing people who are vulnerable and maybe slightly marginalised at the centre is actually quite important. We have a lot of BAME communities. In our trust, we work a lot with Syrian refugees who are coming to Northern Ireland. We've got travellers and Roma. And I think we need to target those marginalised groups and bring those people along. I think, you know, learning is very, very positive for health and well-being, and I think that has come through. And I think the other thing is that Raoul mentioned about learning from each other. I've been involved in Belfast Healthy Cities. It's been around for 25 years, and I think we can learn from other cities, and I think we can also share our learning with other cities, which is something we don't always do. So I think it's definitely a two-way process, and I think that's really good. I think we just need to, terminology is really, really important in these things. And I think lifelong learning is a good term. Obviously, it can lead to economic benefits for people, learning, education, jobs, etc., which is important. And I think we need to recognize that. But it's the social, I think, emotional and physical benefits that are really important in this. And I think, as the junior minister said, that then can affect the outcomes for individuals, for the economy and society. So look, I really welcome the report. I think just moving forward, we very much need to do this in a co-production approach. So we need to bring everybody with us. We talked about partnership. It sits naturally with some organisations. It's maybe not a natural fit with others, but I think we just need that collective response to move forward. And I think the other bit for me, which is really important, although it is difficult, is the whole issue of data. And I think we just need to get better at that. Producing the data, producing the evidence, showing the run chart, showing the graphs, and just evidencing what we're doing. And I think that will then secure the future of such initiatives. So again, just thank you very much for the opportunity, and just well done in the report.
Thank you, Brian. Kelly, you're very much at the coalface in terms of services to the community. How do you feel a report like this can impact on the work for which you're responsible?
Yeah, I think that's very much where I'd like to cover off. Obviously, I'd like to echo, not take up time with all the thanks, particularly to Dolores and Danny, selfishly, for the invite. But it's very much the report, I think, even without getting into the content, just the format of it, as others have referred to, the fact that you did have the evidence and then the expert, the expert input, but then those case studies and very much those community case studies as well. I was chatting to Dolores, and I actually started out my working career in the Shankill Women's Centre. So the Ballybean Women's Centre example really resonated with me, and I think it's back to that statement that was given about investing in community learning as investing in health and well-being, but it's also investing in people and in community, and getting to see that at a very early start of your career. How lifelong learning works in practice, and that was from the very basics of starting off with the drop-in space where staff and women mixed, and people that were brought in to deliver programs, whether they were formal and informal, would have mixed in that space as well and broke down barriers. So from a women's centres concept, you had barriers such as childcare and advice and those services on site, which would have helped, but actually a lot of that mingling and that reaching out and drawing people in, that's done in a very much informal space, starting off with lead-in classes like ceramics and craft, for people that didn't have the confidence, and then seeing people, on those early years, progressing from those kind of classes and in the more formal education, both within the centre and outside of the centre, was really amazing to see, and a good grounding for me, as I say. The other thing as well, obviously with my involvement in this current role, is seeing the positive ageing examples, and the Take 5 coming through as well, because obviously again that is about that, back to that thing of making it real for people, making it seem achievable, keeping it very simple, and as I say, drawing people in. So the Take 5 example, looking at messaging, and again, that's become even more important when we have had to switch to engaging virtually and online and through social media. But again, just seeing what can be done in that space and how that works. And I suppose with my North Belfast hat on within council, there's been a lot of work over the past few months, again, building on that, whether it's been by Healthy North Belfast organisations like Ashton and Yeeha. And I actually now seen last night that the Duncairn has started a Northern Lights initiative, and their theme for today is actually keep learning. So that was nice to see, and you can maybe, if you get a chance, look at their social media, again, just video clips, very what's your ideas, what would you like to learn about, again, just drawing people in. So the report for me shows what can be done, what is being done, what could be built on and further developed. And as Brian says, from a Belfast perspective, we're very much, I think, re-engaging with that and hopefully widening the scope and bringing in more partners to do it. The other wee bit I wanted to end with is, the COVID impact others have touched on, and obviously we will have to be cognizant of that. But, that strapline that's become COVID, we're all in this together, was always a community strapline. And I think in terms of taking the recommendations of this report, it's very much valid there too.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. And Danny, you've been very much involved in the production of the report. So what are your initial reactions now at this stage?
I suppose, first of all, I should say congratulations to all the people who have contributed to the report, not just in the production of the report, but the range of case studies that appeared, and there were other case studies which didn't appear and didn't make the final cut. So there were choices to be made. I'm quite happy that the report reflects our view of a good learning city, and that it reflects the broad spectrum of learning and how learning impacts on people's daily lives. And as we know, both the opportunities and the challenges that people face are interconnected and interdependent. I suppose rather than repeat most of what other people have said, I'd like to maybe touch on the issue of the challenges that come out of this kind of report, and how we not only develop policy, and we talk quite a lot about policy alignment, but how we actually take that policy alignment and put it into a planning process, so that when we're talking about making decisions about how services and communities develop, that it actually influences right down from not only a city level, but right down into localities and down to individuals' lives. So for me, the report's very welcome, in that it allows us to make the case that learning is very important to an employability and skills agenda, of course, but equally it's also important to contribute to people's coping mechanisms in terms of building resilience, and we've seen that very clearly during the COVID period, and we will see it in the challenges that we meet as we come out of COVID. But I also suppose it would be important to flag up that there are a number of key kind of policy contributions that are ahead of us at the moment. I know we're going to hopefully hear more about the Programme for Government consultation. I would make an early pitch to you all that learning, the actual term of learning, is not actually in the new Programme for Government outcomes. It may be implied in some of the outcomes, but I think it needs to be much more prominent in the language used. But we also know that there are other policy areas like the review of the Making Life Better public health strategy, which will be on us sooner than later. We know that we're moving into a new skills strategy. And I think when you start to outline the breadth of influence that learning can have, then you translate that down to what does it actually mean to people, and what does it mean in people's lives. And I think that there's a lot of work we can do, not just to repeat the grand phrases that we all use about outcomes and policy development, but how we actually translate that to decision making, and then right down into how we deliver services and how we work with people to not only design those services but deliver them in local communities. And I think the opportunities there through this report and the continuing debate to involve more people. I see in the comments, for example, there were some comments around in the chat about the University of the Third Age, for example. I see no reason whatsoever why we shouldn't be trying to involve absolutely as many people as possible in certainly the public debate. We should involve them in the planning processes, and we should involve them in decision making, and ultimately involve them in the delivery of the approaches and services which meet their needs at their level. I think we've work to do, but I think the report's very welcome. That's me, Trevor.
Okay, thank you, Danny. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground in those responses. In terms of how the report might actually be used and the current circumstances we find ourselves in, I think a lot of people have made reference to the pandemic, and we're at a stage now where people are starting to turn towards a path out of the effects of the pandemic, and perhaps an air of hope is being expressed. And I suppose this is a kind of a political question to the panel, but in the discussions about COVID recovery, what would be your ideas about how we can ensure that adult learning is actually seen as part of that recovery process from the COVID pandemic? Stephen, would you like to start that one off?
Yeah, so I think one of the parts of COVID recovery is going to be about trying to reduce unemployment, which, as I said, has kind of spiked up. So showing those links which we know exist between learning and employment, I think, will be important. But I think the other point, I wanted to link that back actually to the point that's made in the report about measurement of some of these things and data. And I feel like, as somebody who started life as an economist, I should probably respond to that, because I think that is part of the answer as well. So we worked with 13, I think it was, community learning providers in England to try and embed various social metrics of outcomes. So, for example, some of the NHS metrics of well-being or self-efficacy, or things like that. And the idea was, A, these things are important, but B, if you want to persuade the NHS or doctors or whoever to engage with you, you kind of need to talk their language. So as we recover from coronavirus and we're thinking about how we improve health and well-being, we kind of need to talk the health sector's language a bit as well. So I wonder if there's something about thinking about implementing those metrics. And the answer was yes, you could do it. And secondly, and helpfully, people who took part in adult learning generally had an increase. They started below, on average, population levels of well-being, but kind of improved somewhat thereafter. And I know Rochdale got mentioned in the chat as well. We did some work with the adult education team in Rochdale to try and show the wider benefits of learning, including on health and well-being. And we got an independent evaluation that showed where some savings came to other public services. And I can't remember the exact numbers now, but basically for every £1 invested, there was about £2.80 or something in savings to other public services. And that included the health service, because people were signing up at dentists and doctors rather than going to A&E. So part of the recovery from coronavirus is going to be how do we show the impacts of adult learning on other policy areas so that they want to build it in, and lifelong learning becomes the golden thread that runs through all of those policy areas that other contributors have mentioned as well. So you can't do it all through evidence, and actually case studies are really, really valuable, and learners who demonstrate these benefits as well. But I think that kind of, those points link together a little bit. Those are the big challenges that are coming up as we recover from the virus. How do we show that adult learning has a really big role to play in that?
Okay, Stephen, Brian,
yeah,
what's your view on this whole question about the recognition of the role of adult learning in the wider recovery from the pandemic, but also, I suppose, building the necessary links between education and health that try and ensure that we're not buried in the silos that everybody is so concerned about?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think we have a tendency to sort of go off down our own silos, even though we do talk at times about partnership working. So I think collective working is important. I suppose I mean, initially when you said it, and I was talking to somebody last week about this, about the whole COVID recovery and, how do we approach it and what do we do and whatever else. And they basically said that the two main things that we need to think of, I suppose, are what's the message and also the timing of that message. There's a lot of competing things happening at the moment. And there's a lot of people talking about COVID recovery and what it means and what it's going to mean for the economy and business and our health and well-being and whatever else. So I think it's probably using, what's in the report in terms of getting the message right and getting the key points out of that. And then I suppose for me, then it's when do you do it? What's the timing right of that? I mean, at the moment, we've done a lot of work around the mental health and emotional well-being, and talking to psychologists in the trust has been kind of saying, look, there's a time to get those messages out, and it may not be now, it might be a week or 2 weeks. So I think in terms of lifelong learning, I think it's really important that we are clear about our message. I think the evidence is there, and the report certainly pulls that together. And then it's just actually the timing of actually how you then land it with whoever that needs to land with. As I said earlier, that's either individuals, communities, or with other agencies. And I suppose, Kelly alluded to earlier, we would see the opportunity through community planning and the potentials through the organizations around that table to sort of drive such initiatives, or at least provide some sort of support to it. So I think there's definitely things to be done. It is just that the timing and the message, I think, are really, really important at this time.
Okay, Brian and Kelly, when you're in North Belfast and you're delivering your services there, are also educational providers in the north of the city as well. So how do we ensure then that you know, we're developing a common language between our educational professionals and our health professionals, so that, you know, there's a recognition of the role that learning can play in improving people's health in all sorts of ways?
I think that's back to Danny's point and Brian's point, I suppose. You know, on a citywide basis, we'll have an opportunity to do that through community planning and the structures within there. But more importantly, probably, you know, I would agree with Danny, it's how we get that down further, you know, with the council's approach, looking at the north, south, east and west, you know, and how we sort of reach out further. And I suppose that's also for me a way to hopefully try and break down the silos, or at least bring the silos into a collective space. So when we're starting to look at our recovery plans, both our recovery plans, I suppose, and our future developmental plans, you know, that we're bringing the right people around the room, around several rooms that are informing those plans. And if we can't get above and beyond the silos, then we're very, you know, we're at least making sure that we're taking account of each silo or the main silos for that community, for that neighbourhood, and reflecting on that and building on that as we're going forward. So there's something about a citywide level for me, and then there's something about, you know, catering to the needs of localities and the needs of neighbourhoods, and that's certainly the approach that council's keen to do.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. And Danny, you're going to get the last word here. And you made
that's a bad thing.
You made a last short word, and you made reference to the absence of learning in the draft programme for government. So, have you any comments finally to make about achieving, you know, political commitment to this whole notion of the key link between learning and health?
Well, I mean, I think it's been very useful to have the endorsement of the report of the two junior ministers for starters. The part of the difficulty is the programme for government. If you remember, our last programme for government was based on an outcomes-based approach, and the idea that outcomes could be set across government departments. And well, that was a very useful and laudable kind of process. Part of the difficulty then was our assembly then fell for 3 years or more. So we didn't have the political stability to be able to test out whether we could actually plan across departmental lines. So, and that leads to a difficulty that we have is part of the issue of setting outcomes at a programme for government level is that we still allocate our public finances across departments. And that in itself, the financial kind of process that we have almost implies that there's going to be silos from each department. So the programme for government outcomes approach, which shares outcomes across government departments, should in theory allow us to develop outcomes which are relevant across communities and across populations. It should in theory take us away from the financial planning, silo planning that we're kind of stuck with. But when you read the new consultation on the programme for government, I think there are 9, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 9 outcomes which has been reduced. The difficulty with reducing is that you kind of miss some of the detail. And while learning is clearly implied across a number of the outcomes, I think sometimes you actually have to speak the words. You have to spell it out. And I would be quite hopeful that the people on this screen and in this conversation will, in their programme for government responses, actually elevate learning and use the examples in the report, but use the examples that they've had throughout COVID of where learning has had a positive impact and why learning can be that golden thread. I think somebody used the term in the chat earlier. So for me, it is that kind of view. We in this part of the world, we rely quite heavily on public services, and community planning and the programme for government allows us an opportunity to reshape how those public services are not only funded, but how they actually run, how they connect with communities. And I think that's equally as important, because if we look at our communities as assets, rather than looking at our communities as a cost, then you develop a very different view of those communities. So I think there is something about how we use our collective strength to influence a programme for government. I think it then can reflect itself in planning at a community planning level across all 11 councils. And there will be policy developments, and I see Paul Donaghy on the screen from OCN. He would have and he'd be quite strong on how we can input to the skills consultation and how we can develop consistency across our messages, consistency across our decision making, because that's our real challenge. If we don't do that, then a lot of the other stuff that we talk about becomes fine words, and we don't actually achieve the outcomes that we talk about.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Danny. Look, I'm sure with a panel like this, we could go on for another hour, but I'm afraid time is against us. So could I thank Stephen, Brian, Kelly and Danny for their contributions to what I hope is going to be an ongoing debate. And really, that takes me to what happens next. We will have a programme of dissemination for the report itself. We've encouraged, obviously, everybody who has been present at the event this afternoon to download the report for themselves and to read it. We'd like to have a dialogue with you, so if you wanted to come back to us with comments and questions, either through email or through the Adult Learning Forum website, we'd be very happy that you would do that. But I would like to finish just with talking about something which Danny and others mentioned as we went through the event, and that's the number of consultations which are coming up in the near future. We're going to look specifically, and we were asked to do this by the junior ministers at the consultation for the programme for government. But as already has been mentioned, there will be shortly a consultation opening in relation to a new skills strategy for Northern Ireland, and people have mentioned other consultations which are ongoing as well. A review of the mental health strategy, for instance. And although we would always want to respond in terms of the specifics, I mean, this report is addressing specifically the relationship between adult learning and health and well-being. We're also interested in encouraging as many people as possible to make the broader points of the contribution which lifelong learning can make across a whole range of areas, which is why it's so important to take that perspective, I think, when commenting on things like the programme for government. So we're just going to, in response to a request from the junior ministers, we're just going to play a short clip in relation to the programme for government consultation, and then I'll just make a few final remarks and thanks, and that'll be the end of the programme for this afternoon. So a quick word about the programme for government consultation.
The Executive has launched its consultation on the draft outcomes framework for its new strategic programme for government, and we're inviting you to share your views. Let us know your priorities and tell us about the positive changes you want to see in our society over the next year and beyond.
Every voice is important. This consultation is a public conversation across our whole society about the kind of life that you want for yourself and for your family. It is the first step in developing our programme for government, and it will help shape our work to make life better for all of you.
COVID-19 has given us a different perspective on the way we live our lives, and it has changed how we respond to challenges together. Developing this programme for government gives us the opportunity to build on that momentum.
We want to deliver a programme for government which focuses on the things that matter to most people, such as creating a society where everyone feels safe and where we're happy and contented. These draft outcomes are a foundation on which we can build, design and deliver public services that will improve social well-being for all of us.
As Education Minister, I talk to teachers, parents, school children and other colleagues in the education system every day. They understand the real challenges being faced in education and what it will take to help make things better. That is why I want everyone, and especially our young people, to tell the Executive what you think. We have made sure that the consultation document is available in different formats, including child-friendly and easy-read versions.
We have been listening to what you have had to say about the need to improve lives and build an inclusive and fair society in which we care for everyone, regardless of age or background. We have sought to reflect that in the draft programme for government outcomes. So tell us what you think. Together, we can build a caring society.
The programme for government will be supported by a budget. Your views will help inform where funding should be allocated and ensure we deliver for all our citizens, including workers and businesses, particularly as we respond to the pandemic.
We want to make sure the outcomes are complete and reflect the views of everyone across our cities, towns and rural communities. We want to know more about the challenges and problems that you face and what you would like to see done differently to make your life better.
The programme for government will set the direction to strengthen our public services and boost our infrastructure. As we recover from this pandemic, it's essential that we avail of all of the new opportunities, new ways of living and working and travelling for the good of our society.
Outcomes-based working across the programme for government means government working in partnership with society to improve well-being for everyone. This will help drive innovation and boost creativity in all that we do and help to deliver better results and a prosperous society for all in the longer term.
The consultation closes on the 22nd of March 2021. For more information, go to northernireland.gov.uk/PFG.
Well, I don't know about you, but I think it's quite clear to me that in listening to all the ministers talk about the various areas which they're anxious to address in the programme for government, that it's clear that learning has got a contribution to make across all of those areas. And I think the more people who can make that kind of response in relation to the consultations on the programme for government, but also the other strategies we remembered, the more chance I think there is of getting some kind of official policy recognition of the role of adult learning, which is one of the key aims of the Adult Education Impact Forum, and that the programme for government should be underpinned by what I would describe as a culture of lifelong learning. And if I could just say that the first webinar in the Impact Forum's programme for 2021 on the 19th of March will seek to address that very question. What does it mean to have a culture of lifelong learning in Northern Ireland? And that's the discussion which we want to have at the first webinar in our programme of 2021, as I said, on the 19th of March. So I think the final thing for me to say is on the screen you should see the details of the FALNI website and the lifelong learning page where you're able to access the report. And I would again encourage people to enter into a dialogue with us in relation to the report when you've had time to read it. So the final thing I suppose I should say this afternoon is just to record thanks again to a number of people. First of all, thank you to the writers who contributed to the reports, including Raoul, who was good enough to join us this afternoon from UNESCO, and some of the other writers were with us during the course of the event as well. I'd like to thank the panel who gave their time this afternoon and contributed to the discussion. And finally, I'd like to thank all the participants, the large number of participants, and it was very gratifying to see the interest that there was in relation to the report itself. I hope you enjoy reading the report and get a lot out of it. And as I said, I hope you will join us at future events where we will hope to continue the discussion and the dialogue which we've begun this afternoon. So thank you to everybody and good afternoon to you all.